never said I oppose fracking. Show the tape. Put it on your website. Put it on the website.
Live from Clark Studios in Rochester, New York. Broadcasting around the world. You're listening to You Made It Political, where the voice of the keyboard warrior is finally heard and the arguments presented are put to the political test. And now, here's your host, Matt Clark.
Good morning, America. Good morning, Patriots. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Around the country and around the world. We have a lot of people coming in from the UK, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and many, many other parts of the globe. Italy, a lot of Europe, even over in Asia. So thank you guys all for tuning in. We're making headway. The show's growing, and it's all because of you people, and I thank you all so much. Speaking of Australia, we have a real problem over in Australia. They have been under lockdown for 250 days. 250 days. Why don't most Americans know about this? Well, because the United States media doesn't want to cover it. For one, they don't want to let us know what's going on over in Australia. They're on lockdown. It's a totalitarian state, authoritarian. They are in such bad shape, particularly in Melbourne. But most Americans don't know about it. Why? Well, because the Democrats are cheering it on and they want us to know nothing about it. Tucker Carlson was on last night, Fox at 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, showing the world exactly what's going on over in Australia. They aren't even lying about it anymore. They're not even hiding the fact that the New World Order is well and truly there. Why don't they want us to know? Why does YouTube keep shutting down and banning every single video that not only I talk about, but videos that I share from Sky Australia over in Australia? They want nothing to do with letting the American people know just how tyrannical things have gotten over in Australia. This is the shit that China pulls when they don't want the rest of the world to see the protests that are going on in America or other free countries, because they don't want their citizens getting the idea and start fighting for their rights even harder over in China. That's what happens in a communist country. We're not a communist country yet. However, the media would lead you to believe that we are, in fact, are. The Democrats, they don't want you knowing what's going on in Australia because they don't want you or me or any of us getting any ideas. Well, Tucker Carlson has done a phenomenal job exposing the truth on his show, and he seems to be the only news journalist even talking about it, which, to be honest, is disgusting. What happened to reporting the actual news? Well, we know the propaganda machine is in full effect, and we know that no matter what, there's no going back. Unless, of course, the American people stand up and fight. So last night, Tucker Carlson was discussing the fact that the New World Order is well and truly here. They are here to stay. Tucker gave a phenomenal take. If you haven't yet seen that, you're going to want to go back and watch that. 250 days, Australia has been locked down. 250 over what we all know is kind of nothing more than a serious flu here, but governments around the world don't want to admit it. If you're so much even caught with a mask below your nose in Australia, you will get taken out and beaten to the ground. You will get arrested. You are not allowed to go more than, I think it's a block from your home right now without permission from the police. And if they catch you on the streets, even so much smoking a cigarette with your mask down, you're going to jail. It is that bad in Australia. It is so bad that they are calling it the New World Order. And I'm going to play a clip from you. For those of you who haven't seen this, it's going to blow your mind. It is disgusting what is going on over there right now. Let's take a look at this clip, and we'll show you just how outrageous things are getting.
But this is very much. Well, exposure sites be put back in place, especially with reopening and people going back to pubs and stuff? Because our exposure sites still, will they be put back in place to be listed once we are reopening? Because they're not at the moment.
We will be looking at what contact tracing looks like in the New World Order. And yes, it will be pubs and clubs and other things if we have a positive case there. Our response may be different if we know that people are fully vaccinated. So we're working through a number of those.
So as you just heard her, she just called it the New World Order. I mean, that's what the press are referring to it now in Australia. I mean, this isn't conspiracy stuff anymore, people. This is really happening. And it's happening because we all sat on the sidelines and did absolutely nothing about it. At least we have our guns in America. Australia had their guns taken away a few years ago, so it's no surprise that the police and the government are walking all over them. What's disappointing is that the police aren't on their side. It's that the police have actually taken the direction of full dictatorship from the Australian government. At least in America, we have, for now, the police on our side. I don't think our police will be so easily bought like the Australian have bought their police. I don't think our law enforcement agencies are going to bend over to tyranny the same way they've done in Australia. And thank God, because we are the last free country in the world. I mean, it all stops here. So it's sad to lose Australia. It's sad to see the direction Canada is now heading. It's sad to see what's going on in UK. But we can't let this happen here. And we need to pay attention of what's going on over in Australia if we want any indication to know what direction the United States is heading right now. So Tucker Carlson was on last night showing videos of police beating the crap out of Australians for so much as having a cigarette without a mask on their face. I mean, I don't know how you smoke without pulling your mask down. I mean, I'm not exaggerating. This is really what's going on. So draconian COVID policies in Australia may be coming to the United States. One thing about Americans is we do love Australia. Most Americans have never been there. It's an awfully long way. But when Americans think of Australia, they imagine a freer, tougher version of themselves. I mean, look, Steve Irwin, Crocodile Dundee. I mean, we love that guy. So, you know, we really look up to Australia. And it's very sad to see what's happening here. But it's getting a bit out of control. It's not supposed to be happening in a free country like Australia. Right now, what we're witnessing are reports of people being body slammed, protests growing, very draconian measures. We've seen a lot of footage from Australia that shows the chaos, but something that's not immediately obvious from the American vantage is that this is not all of Australia. The whole country is not locked down. In Australia, most of the lockdowns are in the eastern part of the country, which is very weird to me. Why is it only in Melbourne? That's where the capital of the country is and where the federal government has the most control. Western Australia has the most, Western Australia, home to most of the country's national resources, isn't locked down at all. 50,000 fans just crowded inside a stadium for a huge rugby match in Perth. So what's going on in Melbourne? Why have the Australian government actually restricted flight over that city so that the media can't show all the protests that are going on? Why are these lockdowns only restricted to one city and not the entire country? 50,000 fans just crowded inside a stadium for a rugby match in Perth, the capital of Western Australia. No one beat them with nightsticks or hosed by the police. The rugby match was not a super spreader, which is another insane thing. And even in college football games here in the United States, I mean, our kids can't go to school without a mask, but we can send 60, 70, 80,000 kids into a packed football stadium, and the CDC comes out and says it's not a super spreader event. But kids sitting 3 feet apart in school is considered high risk. I mean, Ebola DEFCON 5 here when it comes to our little ones masked up and muzzled in school. So we all know the whole thing makes absolutely no sense. And we're trying to ask ourselves, how did this happen? How is it that in Australia you have one city fully locked down, like absolute communism, in just Melbourne? Well, it's because the government is predominantly in that one location. They have the biggest power. They have the most people on their side, or government officials there in one location. And that's encouraging to me, to be honest. It's encouraging to know that the control in Australia is only limited to one single area, the area where there's most government presence. And that's encouraging to me because in the end, when the people stick together, when they rise up, they will prevail. I had conversations with people on Facebook this morning, and I said, listen, I'm actually not that worried about this kind of situation coming to America. One, we have our guns, and somebody brilliantly put it on commented on my Facebook page the other day, and he said, listen, Second Amendment isn't just a carry. And he's exactly right. Phenomenal comment. Second Amendment is to overtake a tyrant government. So we still have our guns, and I think our government knows that we will not hesitate to use them on a tyrannical government. There's a big difference. I don't condone war, but I do advocate for our constitutional rights, which we all know. The Second Amendment is the right to bear arms, and not just to go hunting. It's to overtake a tyrannical government. Well, Australia can't do that because their guns were taken away. So it's too late for them. They're screwed. I don't know how they're going to fight. I mean, they've literally been restricted as to how they're going to be able to fight in the first place. It's an awful, awful feeling. So how did this all happen? How does Western Australia not lock down but remain virtually COVID-free? Simple, by controlling its borders. Western Australia didn't allow thousands of people to stream in from anywhere they wanted in the world. I mean, that is why they're doing so well with COVID. Our issue here in the United States is Joe Biden and the Democrats have opened the borders up to pretty much whoever wants to come in illegally. And they're not even being tested, and they're not being masked. There's no mandates whatsoever. Yesterday, I posted that U.S. House Democrats actually blocked any mandates, vaccine or mask, for illegal immigrants that have come in. So, for example, the 15,000 that stormed the border a few days ago, none of them have to be vaccinated. But you do if you work for a company that has 100 people or more. You do if you're a healthcare worker on our front lines risking your life to save others. You do if you're a first responder or a law enforcement agency. But the illegal immigrants that come through these borders do not have to be vaccinated. That's the difference between us and Australia. So although I don't agree with the draconian measures and the physical abuse that they're causing to Australians there on the ground, I do agree with the fact that they've closed their borders. No nonsense, no exceptions whatsoever. So Western Australia didn't allow thousands of people to stream in from anywhere they want in the world. They're not Texas. They didn't care about protecting their borders. They're not worried about being called racist. It seemed common sense, and it worked. And here's the really revealing thing. Australia's federal government is angry that Western Australia has closed its borders. They want that part of the country open to its borders. Why might that be? Well, according to ABC News, Australia's government is arguing that Western Australia's internal border restriction are a drag on the national economy. So COVID mandates are far greater threat to Australia's economy and its social fabric than COVID itself. The Queensland Health Minister in Eastern Australia explaining that the outdoor mask mandates are necessary because of two new COVID cases. So all hell broke loose and 2 COVID cases in Western Australia, and the whole thing's on lockdown. So there's parts of Australia that I agree with as far as closing its borders, and there's parts where I think they're just batshit crazy, closing down the entire area because of 2 cases. So what are they not showing us? Let's take a look at some of the chaotic scenes that are happening.
Brown spots that we see when,
and it's very concerning to me that the media is not showing any of this. We'll play that clip right now. So these are chaotic scenes that you're watching right now outside or inside Australia. I mean, look at this carnage. These are students and they're being shot at, rubber bullets. But still, this is what the media is not showing us. Australia has been protesting every single day for months on end now. They've had enough. And every time that we try to show this, YouTube takes it down, or it's blocked, or it's restricted, or shadow banned. And none of our politicians want to discuss the fact that this is going on right now here in our country, or in Australia. Well, you better believe, people, that it's just a matter of time before it comes to a town right here in America. Here's another clip that they're not showing you. Let's play that clip.
This one kind of gives you, like, you know, different angles and stuff.
Hey guys, Bubba here at The Bubba News. All in one word, all in one news. The construction workers shutdown in Melbourne has gotten crazy as thousands upon thousands have been protesting today. And there was actually a bunch of violence that started popping up as people that are not even part of the protest are joining because they're tired of the lockdown.
Melbourne has faced a day of fury with construction workers taking over the Westgate Bridge and shutting down city streets in a backlash against the shutdown of the building industry. Hundreds blocked the bridge for 2 hours, leaving drivers caught in the chaos with nowhere to go.
Victoria's construction industry shut down and fighting back. Hundreds of furious tradies, joined by hardcore anti-lockdown troublemakers, used extreme tactics to storm the Westgate Freeway just after 2 p.m.
First of all, listen to how the mainstream media calls them troublemakers, which is total bullshit. These are anti-lockdown patriots, not troublemakers. And this is what's pissing me off about the media, and Tucker Carlson raised it last night. He said, there is nothing wrong with protesting. These people have had enough. Who was the media to call these people troublemakers? These aren't troublemakers. These are patriots fighting for your freedom. So we're not going to allow the media to normalize the term troublemakers. And every time I hear it, I will personally call it out.
They blocked lanes in both directions, forcing traffic back for kilometres.
Get all eyes on Melbourne.
Some staged a dangerous sit-in, others attacked motorists, all with little to no resistance from police.
There are cops up ahead, but it looks like it's going to escort us through.
A handful took joyrides, dozens acted as cargo on empty trucks' trays. The dangerous stunt forcing Vic roads to close on-ramps during the busy afternoon peak. Witnesses say many were drunk, hurling abuse to anyone within earshot. Police managed to arrest a few, but most of...
So anyway, I'm not even going to give the mainstream media the benefit of the doubt to make these people look bad anymore, because we all know that it's perfectly acceptable to take to the streets and protest when you've had enough. And that's all that's happening now in Melbourne. But the mainstream media here in the United States doesn't want to show it. Our government doesn't want to talk about it. And like I said in the beginning of this show, this is what communist countries like China do. They don't want you to see protests around the world because they don't want you getting any ideas that in the end, protests actually work when enough people show up and revolt. For thousands of years, we've been revolting, and they've worked. But people are scared today for some reason. And I believe it's because we all together haven't hit rock bottom. And when we do all hit rock bottom, hopefully it's not too late, but then maybe we'll actually start to come back and nip tyranny in the bud. Because something's got to give. Because what we're doing right now is not working. Things are so out of control in Australia, and not the whole country, but the western part, Melbourne, and it's the part where they have the most government control. I don't think it's going to happen or get as far here in the United States, and I think our government knows that. After all, we only have a 1.3 million man military. There's 380 million Americans in this country. So when push comes to shove, I do think the people will have their way. They'll have their say. our voice should be heard at the election polls. And if we feel like the election polls are in jeopardy or jeopardized, or we've lost integrity at the polls, then yeah, the next step will be to take to the streets. And I think our government knows that. Hopefully it won't get as far as what's going on in Australia, but we do need to pay attention to Australia. We do need to really take this thing very seriously. And we need to disregard what the media say as far as them being, or the protesters being labeled as troublemakers. And they're doing the same thing. In the United States, it would have been Trumpers. Notice how every time conservatives or patriots revolt or they protest, they're labeled as Trumpers. They're not Trumpers. They're protesters. And I'm sure there's a lot of people in those crowds that don't even like Trump, but they are American. And they'll still go out and they'll fight for their freedom and they'll fight for the democracy. And they'll continue to do so, regardless of the fact that they like Trump or not. So we won't allow the mainstream media to label anybody who wants to exercise their freedom of speech as a Trumper. We're just Americans. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with protesting. The violence that comes with it is a different story. But protesting peacefully, everybody has every right to do that. So back home here in America, we have a little bit of another issue. We have a issue with the LAPD being overworked, and they are now saying emergencies only, people. The LAPD is starting today going to limit their response to emergency only calls. Are you surprised? I mean, are you surprised by any of this? Because we've seen in these very predominantly and Democratic controlled cities, they've been trying to defund the police for too long now. Too long they've been trying to defund the police. And this is what you get. The police are overworked, not just in Los Angeles, but they're the first ones to come out and say, hey, listen, cut the shit. We are done going out to all these nonsense calls. We're done being called to mass calls. We don't care if Board of Education meetings are getting a little bit loud. Unless there's violence, don't call us. So they're putting their foot down and they're saying emergencies only. Please, starting today, big cities police force limiting its response to calls. Now, this is very scary. And we all knew this was going to happen when we saw Democrats starting the defund the police movement. We knew that it was just a matter of time before the law enforcement agencies are going to say, listen, we can't keep up here. We cannot answer every single call while you continue to take our resources away. So they've now come out with it and they've said, listen, emergency calls only. That's what we're doing here. So exactly what does this mean here or what does this mean over in Los Angeles? Well, as of today, the LAPD has had enough. They are limiting their calls to emergencies only. California Governor Newsom signed a series of police reform bills Thursday to address law enforcement misconduct. So this comes after Newsom again. I mean, this guy is like, I don't know what he's thinking. I mean, I don't know if he's intentionally trying to destroy California. I'm not sure what's going on with him, but he just signed a series of police reform bills on Thursday to address law enforcement misconduct that would actually strip officers of their badges for a range of incidences, among other measures. So Newsom comes out and he says, all right, if you don't abide by my draconian laws, I'm going to strip you of your badge. So clearly police is like, you know what? Screw you, Newsom. We're only going to answer limited calls. See, I think some of these Democrat governors like Newsom, like Kathy Hochul and others throughout the United States, I think they tend to forget that they're actually not the ones calling the shots. The people are calling the shots. And our law enforcement agencies took an oath. Unlike in Australia, they're not going to bend over to the tyrannical measures that the government is forcing them to pursue. So the police and the law enforcement agencies here have said, you know what, Newsom, screw you. not only are we not going to really give a shit about anything that you have to say, but we're also going to limit our calls now. So you're the one who's going to suffer at the end of the day because the buck stops with the governor. So one way that the police agencies are hitting back at these governors are saying, you know what, we're just going to make you look like a fool. And we're going to do that by not responding to every single call. Who gets hurt in the end? The people. Yes, I'm aware of that. But you have to remember, in a lot of these Democrat states, the people are the ones shaming the officers. So what the hell do they care? They're thinking, we're going out on a limb for you guys all the time. Every day we're risking our lives, and you're not even recognizing that anymore. Not only are you not recognizing it, but you're shaming us and just giving us shit every single day. So should these police officers really care about many of the people in their own districts who continue to shame them and literally hate them? So Newsom is out there now, coming up with more police reform bills that want to address law enforcement misconduct now. That would strip officers of their badges for a range of incidences. Surrounded by lawmakers and the family members of victims killed by police officers, Newsom signed. So, of course, they put on their big show. They had victims of those who were killed by or families of the victims who were killed by officers. They put on this big little shit show, as they do. Yesterday, he signed 4 bills he touted would increase transparency. During his remarks, California Attorney General Rob Bonta also said there is a crisis of trust when it comes to law enforcement. I don't believe that. I think they're generalizing. There isn't a conflict of trust or a crisis of trust here. There's a crisis, and it's always been this way. There's a crisis of a few rogue cops. You can't take a few rogue cops and now call it a statewide crisis of trust. Yesterday I was actually going to pick up dinner, and I pull into the shopping plaza complex, and there's these 2 girls sitting there on the curb playing music, trying to raise money because they ran out of gas money. I don't know. They must have been traveling because clearly there's enough jobs here. If anybody's trying, I don't have much sympathy for anybody begging for money today because there's a help wanted side at pretty much every freaking restaurant and fast food franchise in America right now. I mean, it's never been an easier time to go out and make money. So apparently these girls were traveling. They ran out of money. So they were raising money for gas, playing music on the corner of the street. I go in, I pick up my food, I come out, and I see 2 New York State troopers pulled over, giving them money. And they didn't do it for the cameras. They didn't do it to try to prove anybody wrong. They did it out of the kindness of their own heart. I witnessed it. I tried to grab my phone quick enough. I wanted to video it, but I was too late. And this is what we don't see of these wonderful and amazing law enforcement officers. We don't see how much good they do in the world. We only see what the mainstream media wants us to witness or tries to portray them as monsters, which we all know they're not. But America doesn't get that right now because they're so brainwashed to what the mainstream media says. I mean, it's disgusting, the brainwashing that's going on. I'll talk a little bit about, at a commercial break, what I plan on doing to help counter that brainwashing in a movement that we've started. But we know the brainwashing is an all-time high, and it was just really nice to see these law enforcement officers actually pull over, give what little paycheck they actually take home. I mean, we know police officers don't make a lot of money, and they're still the first ones to pull out their wallet and help somebody in need out. And it was very nice to see. I wish more of the country could see this. I wish the media would highlight more of the good that all these officers do, but they don't. They don't because they are on the same team as the tyrannical Democrats. It's all collusion to move the United States closer to, like Australia already admitted, the New World Order. So despite Newsom trying to now impose stricter law enforcement misconduct measures on these fine men and women, the dozens of groups are hitting back. Dozens of groups of police officers are opposing these legislations, claiming it subjects law enforcement officers to double jeopardy, with vague definitions of wrongdoing and calls for the use of an oversight panel that would potentially be biased and lacking in expertise about the law enforcement. We know that's going to happen. We know that whatever panels that Newsom puts together to, I guess, be the watchdog for the police are going to be very biased, especially in a Democrat state, and they're very worried and concerned about that. So the way that they're hitting back is basically saying, you know what, guys, screw you. We're not accepting this. This is ridiculous. We are now going to hit back with not answering every single call unless it's an absolute emergency. That's what they're going to be doing. So it's music to my ears to know that emergencies only now in California. They've had enough. They're sick of Newsom. They're sick of the Democrats pissing and crapping all over them after everything they've done. And they're now saying, starting today, big city police force limited in its response to calls. So I think that's great. Be careful what you wish for, Democrats, because you're about to see it right there in your hometown because they've had enough. Guys, stay tuned. We'll be right back. We'll talk about the fact that Pelosi's infrastructure bill is backfiring. And thank God, because this country cannot handle any more spending. We'll be right back and we'll talk about that. You Made It Political would not have been possible without this book right here, Expert Secrets by my man, Russell Brunson. Russell Brunson wrote this book to help people like you and I become leaders in our space, to gain an audience and a public following that respects, loves, and watches our shows on a daily basis. Expert Secrets will help you find your voice and give you the confidence to become a leader. It'll show you how to build a mass movement of people whose lives you can affect. And most importantly, it'll teach you how to become an expert authority in your field where people actually pay you for your advice. The best part about Expert Secrets is it's absolutely free. You just pay for shipping, whether you're a business owner, an entrepreneur, a podcaster, or a live YouTube streamer. You want to grab a copy of this book. It'll teach you everything from building your audience to driving traffic to making this a full-time job so you can get paid for your passion.
Welcome back to You Made It Political, where the voice of the keyboard warrior is finally heard, and the arguments presented are put to the political test. And now, here's your host, Matt Clark.
All right, guys, welcome back to the show. Listen, if you want to call in, we're actually taking call-ins. You can call 585-643-7711. Today, we've been talking about the New World Order in Australia. We've been talking about the fact that LAPD law enforcement agents are sick of Newsom's BS, and they're fighting back by saying, you know what, screw you guys. We're not responding to all the calls that you want us to go to. We're not dealing with mask mandates. We're not dealing with Board of Education meetings. We're dealing with emergencies only. All right. So Democrats, be careful what you wish for because you're the ones who wanted to defund the police. And now this is happening. So good luck with that. We wish you well. Hopefully you're not going to need anybody to come rescue you when there's somebody in your home ready to kill you and potentially your entire family. Horrible, horrible what they're doing in Democratic cities. And now this is what's going to happen in return. All right, guys, listen, there's something that I want to talk to you all about before we get into the rest of the show. And it has to do with a movement that I started recently. And it's something that I'm very excited about. And it's a way that we plan on hitting back the mainstream media. The mainstream media is the real enemy here. They've been the enemy. Okay, a lot of people think Biden's the enemy, Pelosi's the enemy. I mean, Biden and Pelosi couldn't punch them way through a paper bag, let alone really do that much damage to the country. We know their handlers are in the background doing what they got to do to destroy America, but that's not even the worst part. The worst part is the media is what's destroying America, mainstream media. And they're doing it by only disclosing half the picture. They're not bringing all aspects of every story to the American people, which is why so many of our friends are as brainwashed as they are. They only hear one side. They don't do their research. They don't really dig deep to find out what's really going on here in America. And it's for this reason that I've decided to start Patriot One News. I launched a media company, but I'm not doing it alone. I'm actually doing it with the help of you, the citizen journalist. And I launched a group on Facebook, and you can find that group. It's called Patriot One News, and we'll put a link in the comments. And I want you, citizen journalists, to join me. So this is a journalistic collaboration effort. The biggest disruption the mainstream media has ever seen is coming. We know that. The wheels are in motion, and I know I have the support of millions of patriots nationwide. We are building the world's first 100% independent news media agency owned by the people, presented by the people, and delivered for the people. America is saturated with left-leaning garbage, and the right has proven to be nothing more than controlled opposition, much similar to our government. We know that's the case. I mean, come on, let's be honest. Democrats are hijacking America. Republicans are acting like they care. We know half of them are rhinos. There's only a very few conservative patriots like Marjorie Taylor Greene, Josh Hawley, Lauren Boebert, Ted Cruz, Jim Jordan, Matt Gaetz. Very, very small few who are actually fighting for the freedoms of this country. But we know most of the Republican parties is controlled opposition, just like our media, and that they pander to the moderate Democrats so that they can get both votes. Well, the media does the same thing. I plan on returning journalism back to the people. We plan on crowdfunding the platform and possibly even tokenizing the platform, the financial infrastructure on the crypto market, in order to secure it from every ever-going rogue. Again, those of you who know the blockchain infrastructure, you'll know what I'm talking about. I'm very excited about this, and I can't wait to bring you all into this project. We're going to need all hands on deck, and if there was ever a time to strike, it's now. So basically, again, people, to make a long story short, what we're doing is we are restoring journalism and giving it back to the people. That's what we're doing here. And you can join my Facebook group. It's called Patriot One News. Go to groups, search Patriot One News. It's not a news platform. It's for anybody who wants to be a citizen journalist, who wants to write and publish their research. We are building a news agency, and you'll be able to join us in that collaborative effort. So it's for the people, by the people, Patriot One News, the people's voice. All right. Nancy Pelosi's under fire. She is now growing increasingly frustrated with the fact that her own party's not even bending over or bowing down to her as far as this $3.5 trillion infrastructure bill is concerned. And thank God, because this country cannot handle another spending spree. I mean, look at people. Look at inflation. Look what's happening at the pumps. Look what's happening at the grocery stores. Look what's happening everywhere in America right now. And so many of you applauded the spending, but neglected the fact that when we spend money like this, that it's just a matter of time before inflation goes through the roof or taxes have to go up. Well, guess what? Both are happening. And I've been screaming about this from the rooftops since we started spending so recklessly. I said one of two things is going to happen. When you borrow this much money or when you print this much money, if you borrow money from overseas, you got to pay it back plus interest. Who's going to pay that back? Well, we're either going to pay it back with taxes, or we're going to have to see consumer prices rise in order to get that money back. It's got to be paid back somehow. When consumer prices rise, that's called inflation. If we have to pay it back in taxes, well, they're going to have to raise taxes to do that. So we're seeing both now. We're seeing inflation, 25-year highs right now. We see it jump double digits every single month. Inflation's out of control. I don't think there's any way going back on that now. We can't put the brakes on anymore, America. We can't. It's too late. We've gone down that road. We've crossed that bridge. We're screwed. The only thing we can do now, you can't fight inflation. Okay, it's economics, it's a free market. You can't fight it. That's the deal. The only thing we can do now is fight this bill, is fight this $3.5 trillion infrastructure bill that we all know only 6 to 8% is actually for infrastructure. Tell your friends, tell your family, this is not good. Call your legislators, call your congressmen, your senators, tell them this cannot go through. We have got to fight this. The Democrats even know how horrible this is for the country. The fact that Mitch McConnell actually signed off on it isn't surprising. Mitch McConnell is a lost soul. This is why we need to get rid of the old hags in the Republican Party and start to move towards a much younger, aggressive conservative party. We can't trust the likes of Mitch McConnell anymore. Mitt Romney, they're done. So I wasn't surprised to see that he was one of the Republicans that actually voted in favor with Democrats. Joe Manchin, Democrat, is smarter than most of our rhinos right now because he, in fact, voted against it. And he's been very vocal against this infrastructure bill from the very beginning. He knows this is going to kill America. He knows that this is going to be the straw that breaks the camel back as far as our economy is concerned. We are not going to be able to afford higher taxes. Look at, we can barely afford the increase at the gas pump right now, let alone higher taxes. And for those of you who are in the middle class who think you're safe from this, you are not safe from this. This is going to trickle down and it's going to hurt everybody across the board. They always try to pawn raising taxes off as it's only going to affect the wealthy. Well, it's not. And I'll tell you why. Because when these corporations have to pay a higher capital gains tax, they're just going to pass that off to you, the consumer. So all of a sudden, you're going to see your Big Mac now go from $5 to $7, or your slice of pizza go from $3 to $4.50 or $5, until all of a sudden you're going to see your paycheck dwindle away more and more until you just can't afford to survive. So whether you directly get impacted by a higher tax rate or not, you're going to see this in real world life when it comes to your groceries and your gas, not just in the form of inflation, but also in the form of consumers passing off those higher taxes to you. We're also going to see the middle class ultimately get screwed because when our government raises taxes, when they actually raise taxes on the rich move their companies. They'll move them overseas again. So now if they move these companies overseas, guess who loses out? The middle class, who are employees of these companies. And we're already starting to see it. We're seeing corporations here in New York State leave in droves because they're sick of the direction that New York State's going. And that means that all these people are going to be out of jobs. So if you think your job's safe, well, you're going to have a rude awakening soon because no one's job's safe right now, unless you actually work for yourself and you know how to navigate your way through the chaos, which isn't an easy task today. But if you're working for a company, you better believe that company right now has the wheels in motion, and they're looking at other states. They're even looking at other countries. And unless you're willing to really relocate and your whole family and pull your kids out of school and go with them, then I'm afraid you too might be out of a job soon. So higher taxes does not just affect the rich or the corporations. Actually, they're the last people this is going to affect. It's going to affect most of you, or any of you who actually have a 9-to-5 W-2 income-paying job, because you're the ones who are going to get stuck with either a company who's moved overseas or stuck with higher consumer-priced goods at restaurants, grocery stores, and everywhere else that you purchase from on a daily basis. And your paycheck can only pay for so much. So if inflation goes up 20, 30%, that means that your paycheck that you take home is just that much less. Unless you're going to go into business for yourself, you can't find that money. If you've got no savings, you're not going to be able to weather the storm. And trust me, this is not going to be a 2 to 3 month storm. This is going to be a decades-long storm. We know it's coming. And a bill like this $3.5 trillion infrastructure bill is only going to be the nail in the coffin that America right now cannot handle. So The Democrats, Biden and Pelosi, have been trying very hard to push this bill through. Well, fortunately for us, there's a delay on the vote. Pelosi has intentionally delayed the vote because she doesn't think she has the votes, which is great. Dems failed to reach a deal. We know the Democrats have been eating their own, which is beautiful to see. Democrats have failed to come to an agreement on their reconciliation bill Thursday and weren't able to convince moderates to get on board with the bipartisan infrastructure bill. Thank God. Thank God not all Democratic moderates are a lost cause, and that it's mostly AOC and the progressives that are basically trying to hijack America and turn it into this very socialist country. Well, the moderates aren't all on board with it. Thank God. So the moderate Democrats are not in favor of this bill. They can't get the moderate Democrats on board with the bipartisan infrastructure bill. The failure to come to a deal Thursday is a huge blow to Democrats, big win for the rest of us who actually use our freaking heads and know that this bill is the worst thing for America. Democrats are emphasizing the urgency of both bills and targeted the month of September to pass them. What's the urgency, I wonder? Why are we so urgent right now? I haven't heard of any more stimulus checks. I hear they're cutting unemployment. The urgency is because America is broke and they need those higher taxes to pay for their own mistakes. Well, you better believe it's not going to happen to somebody like me because, like I said, I'll just move my company offshore. As a digital company that can work remotely and make money from anywhere in the world, I don't have to tolerate this BS bill. And there are so many other companies online. Watch what happens to Amazon and Google and Apple. Watch what happens to all these digital companies, these software companies that don't have to actually have a physical presence here in the United States. The two bills were not necessarily dead yet, and House Speaker Nancy Pelosi continues to express optimism as she left the Capitol early Friday morning. To be honest, I mean, it's not good. When Nancy Pelosi is delaying a bill, okay, or the vote for a bill, you know that's not good. You know it's not good. So that's what we have going on right now. As far as the infrastructure bill is concerned, House Speaker Pelosi left the Capitol in the wee hours of Friday morning, meaning late last night, as she continued to express optimism that Democrats can come to a deal on the reconciliation bill and convince progressives to vote for this bill. And I don't think it's, to be honest, if this thing passes, at this point, I'll be very surprised. Listen, Sean Hannity said it best the other night. He says, we are never going to be able to pay this back. I mean, we are never, ever going to be able to pay this bill back. Hannity ripped Democrats' spending plan yesterday. And he said, listen, this is just absolutely outrageous. If you guys want to call into the show, go ahead and call in 585-643-7711 if you want to weigh in and talk. But the American people are furious. They are disgusted by this. Let's listen to a few of them have to say right now here in the comments. Hannity says we will never be able to pay this bill back. David says Democrats care about health care, child care, education, infrastructure. Republicans care about tax cuts for the rich and corporations. Hannity is FOS. See, David, that's not true. And a lot of people don't understand this. Health care, child care, education, infrastructure. The only way they're going to get this done is if they raise the capital gains taxes. That's the only way they're going to get it done. Well, we're just not going to accept that. Entrepreneurs, wealthier. Listen, I'd love to put myself in the wealthy category. Let me make it very clear. I'm not there yet. Someday maybe, but I'm in the small business category. I'm where it's going to really hurt because see, if it's not just the rich that this guy, this very confused David thinks it's going to affect. The rich are just not going to be able to hire employees. So people like David who made this ridiculous comment are really the ones who are going to suffer. If our capital gains tax goes up, it means I have left money to invest back into my business, which means I'm not funding or stimulating the economy. When my taxes go up, I can't hire people, which means you are now not going to get hired by me or other companies. Small businesses actually make up 50% of the entire workforce in the United States of America. If you screw with that infrastructure, you're screwing with 50% of America's employees. And this is what the Democrats are failing to tell you all. They're happy to tell you that we're going to raise the rich on or we're going to raise the taxes on the rich. But what they're not telling you is, oh, by the way, that's probably going to affect your job, or it's probably going to affect the cost of goods. That's what they're not telling you. They want to tell you one side of the story without telling you the other. And again, that is the whole purpose that I just started Patriot One News, a conservative, independent citizen journalist platform that's going to bring you both sides. It's going to cover what the mainstream media are failing to report. It's going to cover what the Democrats are failing to disclose as they try to push these spending bills through. So they're only telling you one side of the story. They're not telling you how dangerous this can be. And people like David and other Democrats really don't have any idea that it's not a tax cut for the rich, or that the Republicans are not only about tax cuts for the rich. We want to cut taxes on the rich, not just because we're greedy. It's because we want to be able to take that money and reinvest it into growth. Growth means hiring more employees. And ultimately, we will pay our taxes. But we would rather give our money to you, the American people, the employees, than the government. We'd rather donate to charities than give it to the government, because we don't think the government can be trusted to manage our money. Look what they've done. Leaving $85 billion worth of military equipment in Afghanistan. $85 billion. They just pissed away like that. Gone. So you better believe I don't want them to take more of my money, because they can't be trusted. If anything, they shouldn't even get the tax bill that I recently got. They should not get another dollar of anybody's money, let alone raise the taxes, until they can be proven to manage our finances responsibly. Susie says, I've said for years, the bigger the government, the smaller the people. Amen. Absolutely. Big government is horrible for business. Alan said, it is basically a transfer of private citizens' money to the government. Here's what the number looks like. $3.5 trillion. Taking control of the purse strings is how tyranny can subvert democracy without firing a shot. And Walter says, yet Republicans and GOP, including Mitch McConnell, were perfectly fine with overseeing under the previous Trump administration until now that we have a Democrat in office. Suddenly it's a problem. The flip-flop on issues is downright pathetic and a disgrace to our country. Mitch McConnell was okay with raising the debt ceiling back in 2019. We hadn't spent all that money by then, and we were not in a pandemic or in a massive crisis. To be honest, not raising the debt ceiling right now is the best thing that we could have done. It would have just, if you want to talk about financial collapse on a scale that you've never seen in your lifetime, because a lot of us haven't been around for the Great Depression, raise that debt ceiling and you'll see just what happens to America. We will destroy this economy overnight. We only have 2 to 3 months worth of cash flow. That's all we have in America on a governmental spending level. Raising that debt ceiling, yes, I know they want to avoid a government shutdown, and they'll be able to do it without raising the ceiling, as they've just proven. But, we can't just look at the fact that say, well, Mitch McConnell was okay with raising the debt ceiling back in 2019, but now he's not okay with it now. It's because, one, we weren't in a pandemic. Then we did not already spend trillions and trillions of dollars pissing away money to the American people, and it hasn't done anything to get this economy going. If anything, it's made Americans lazier. It's made them more complacent, and it's just proven that pissing away socialist crack money is not the answer. It's never been the answer. Raising the tax rates have never been the answer, ever. You go back and you show me a president who actually raised taxes and the economy was better off, and I'll shut the hell up. Case closed, you win. But you won't be able to do it. You won't be able to argue that case because it's never happened. Raising the taxes on the rich, pissing away free money to the American people is a great way to destroy America. And right now, we cannot afford to do that. Guys, thank you so much for joining me here. Every day at 10 o'clock, we go live to Facebook, Rumble, and YouTube. We also post everything onto Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, TuneIn, Spotify, Amazon Music, and a host of other platforms. Have a great weekend. We'll see you next Monday.
Thanks for listening to You Made It Political with Matt Clark. Be sure to like, follow, or subscribe to the show, or leave us a review on iTunes. And if you like our show or want to know more, check out YouMadeItPolitical.com.